And that's right. You are listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 1039 WYAB. Andrew is out today. He asked me if I could fill in. I'm Blake Bartlum. Y'all know who I am at this point, at least I hope. Yeah, of course, I'll fill in for Andrew, and we thank him for that every single time he asks us to get in here. It's a wonderful opportunity. Very blessed to be in the position to be able to do this. Look, we got a lot of things to get into today. I'm just going to go really quick, and then tell you where you can find the stream if you want to share it, whatever you want to do. But here's what we're going to be covering today. The first thing, I got so mad listening to stuff this morning that the first thing we're going to talk about is the grifting from these new Never Trump, I guess conservatives is the way to put it. What they're talking about or I guess the lack of what they're talking about when it comes to China's interference in the 2020 election and the Save America Act, and also some of their comments on the Iran war. Then we're going to talk about the latest in Iran because there's been a sort of a big escalation lately. Last night in particular was something we haven't seen in a while over there. And we're also going to talk about the independent autopsy. Independent's a very loose term there, but the independent autopsy released by Ben Crump and the whole NAACP thing regarding Nolan Wells. And then we're going to get into some more stuff with the Save America Act, illegals registered to vote, everything like that. But that's sort of the gist we're going to get started with here today. If you can't listen to us on 1039 WYAB, we're streaming on Rumble, we're streaming on X, we're streaming on YouTube, streaming on Facebook as well. And you can always find any of the programs here on 1039 WYAB on WYAB.com. So we thank y'all for tuning in today. It's a beautiful, actually turned out to be a pretty beautiful day here, July 22nd, year of our Lord 2026. It's going to be hot today, though. It's not going to be fun. As soon as I get done with this, I got to go cut the grass. So that's, just how we do it. But got to cut that grass and get that cash. All right, so let's get into this, okay? So this has really been irking my nerve lately. So last Thursday, President Trump had his primetime address to the nation where he outlined and where his administration released documents and just troves of documents talking about China's interference and other irregularities in the 2020 election. These documents proved that the most significant voter data breach in American history was perpetuated by the Chinese government ahead of the 2020 election. And that sort of their jamboree, their pregame for this was in 2018 in the midterms. And we saw this. The documents prove it. And a lot of people have been aware of this because, whether it was the voter data that was breached, whether it was the tens of thousands of driver's licenses that were faked and sent over to Chinese students so that they could vote in the 2020 election for Joe Biden, by the way, or whether it was the irregularities in Michigan. We all know the story of the 2020 election. That is not a mystery. But what we didn't know that these documents proved is that our intel agencies, the FBI and the CIA, they covered that up, not just from the president or not just from the American people, but they covered it up to the president. These documents proved, and you can see the text messages, the emails, all the stuff where you had CIA and FBI admitting that they were hiding this information from the president because they knew that if it was released, it was going to help his campaign. They knew that. And they would have been right. It would have helped Donald Trump's campaign because Donald Trump, all the time, he said that they're going to use COVID as an excuse to loosen up the rules, expand mail-in voting, all of this stuff that's supposed to have made voting more convenient, but really slowed down the process and opened the door to immense fraud. That's why we went from, there was no voter fraud in the 2020 election. Well, there was some voter fraud, but it wasn't enough to make a difference. No crime has ever talked about like that. Chris Hinkle, who's a fantastic patriot and former FBI agent, he has said that before. And I believe him 100%. You don't go from there was nothing to, there was something, but it wasn't enough. That's no crime is talked about like that. But this is stuff that all of you know. Patriots that listen to the Andrew Gosser Show, listen to WYB. Y'all know this. Y'all know how corrupt 2020 was. Y'all know the backstory. And especially last week with President Trump's address, y'all have an understanding of what really happened. And we all have a better understanding of what really happened and a lot more of the stuff that went on behind the scenes. Even then, they had the illegal immigrants registered to vote. We're going to get more into that later. I want to focus on the China part of this right now because undoubtedly, China interfered in the 2020 election. Without a shadow of a doubt, that has been proven true. And it has been proven true that they did it to help Joe Biden win because they knew that Joe Biden was going to be far weaker on the geopolitical stage than Donald Trump could be. And that has been proven time and time again. Obviously, we know Joe Biden's connections with Hunter, to China, all this stuff. We know this. Now the rest of the nation, hopefully, is starting to get clued into this stuff. But what I have a problem with here, and this is something that really just really grinds my gears. And it's, Blake, why are you going to talk about it then if it's going to make you mad? I think it's important to drive this point home. But our favorite little conservatives, Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the quitters, if you will, they have decided to make this their little issue. And I just heard whoever was on the radio, like on the national program, not Clay and the other guy, they were great. They were fantastic. But the guy that I think is the national, I don't know what station he's from or whatever, but he was talking about this, and it just was like, really? Like, their new talking point is that, well, Republicans control all three branches of government. So how are the elections corrupt? First of all, we have all known, and they will say this time and time again, that it is really the uniparty that is running DC. We know this. The deep state, something that they laugh at now, was something that they were talking about just 2 years ago. The deep state is absolutely real. And these documents proved it. One of the FBI agents in the thing said, yeah, I'm basically running a shadow government at this point. There is no doubt that there was collusion between the intel agencies to hide this information from the American people and from the president of the United States. If that's not a deep state, I don't know what is. We know this. Y'all know. I'm not talking to y'all because y'all are freaking great. But now we have to use this information to educate people, and that's what we're doing. We know this stuff. Time to educate the people. We know that one of the issues with President Trump's first term is that he had the deep state harming him almost everywhere he went. That is why the second term has been so much more efficient than his first term was, because he got people in office who were loyal to him, loyal to America, and who got the job done quicker instead of him having to constantly wonder who's going to stab him in the back, who's actually going to get the job done, and who's going to help make America great again. That's the difference between the first and second term. But his first term, undoubtedly, the deep state, whether it was the DOJ, whether it was the FBI, CIA, Office of the Director of National Intelligence, whatever it was, we know that there was vast amounts of corruption and collusion to harm President Trump and his agenda. And this was proven. But the idea now that the election still can't be corrupt just because Republicans won, what was the whole big thing Donald Trump said at every single political speech he gave ahead of the 2024 election? Make it too big to rig. And what the RNC did differently, what really the Trump campaign did, because the Trump campaign took over the RNC. Laura Trump was the head chairman of or chair lady, I guess, of the RNC committee in the ahead of the 2024 election. Their legal team was as good as it's ever been, and I wish she didn't step down from that position. Because their legal team was fantastic. I remember ahead of the election day where you had early voting and stuff like that, their legal team was on top of everything. And even on election day, they scored several big wins that made sure that a lot of these rules that were not followed were a lot of these laws that were passed unconstitutionally ahead of the 2020 election regarding the mail-in voting, all the stuff. They made sure that those laws were followed, and that the Constitution was upheld ahead of the 2024 election. That is the difference. Of course, coming to that conclusion requires critical thinking and actually analyzing information and telling the truth. So Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, all of these, new never Trumpers, they obviously have a problem with it. So because they can't do any of those things apparently. And it really irks my nerve that they're going with this. Well, all three branches are controlled by Republicans. And why can't they pass the SAFE Act? It's just a distraction. We know that the uniparty is still absolutely a force here with all these rhinos in Congress. We know this. And thankfully, thanks to President Trump and him extending his political power, a lot of those uniparty politicians in the Senate especially are going to be gone now. Thanks to him reaching out and getting these people out of office. Now, what that requires is that Republicans hold the House and the Senate in the midterms. I think they have the Senate, and it's looking more and more likely that they're going to hold the House as well. But that's why we can't be dooming. That's why we have to give something people to vote for. Make sure that people vote Republican in the midterms so that we can get the SAVE Act passed once we get this new slate of senators in here. Bill Cassidy, gone. John Cornyn, gone. Tom Tillis, gone. A lot of these rhino senators are going to be out of office in 2026. A lot of loyal MAGA patriots are going to be coming into office in 2026 because of President Trump, because he extended this stuff. He extended his political power to influence these elections and say, hey, these people don't represent you well. I choose someone that will. And whether it's Julia Letlow in Louisiana, whether it's Ken Paxton in Texas, or whether it's Michael Whatley, And I'm not a huge fan of Watley, but he's going to be better than Tom Tillis was in North Carolina. That's the difference. That's what's going to make a difference so that we can get the SAVE Act passed come next congressional term. Obviously, the passing of Lindsey Graham sort of harmed this a little bit. And say whatever you want about his sister and the whole thing, but I believe that she will help pass the Save America Act. She co-sponsored that legislation this morning. The Save America Act is the most important piece of legislation Congress can get done. By far. That housing bill was horrible. Housing bill, all it did was expand Section 8 housing. It was horrible. The Save America Act is the most important thing that they can get done right now. And by God, I hope they do. I really hope they do because we need it. And we saw this. We see it every single day, whether it's, yesterday New Jersey announced the 6,000 illegal aliens registered to vote, whatever. We see this stuff every single day that the Save America Act is needed. They keep telling us voter fraud doesn't happen. It's not real, all the stuff. But every single day, it seems that more and more it is proved that it does happen and that we need the SAVE Act bad because we know the lengths they're willing to go. They hid vital national security information from the president ahead of a major election. That is how far they're willing to go. If you don't think that they have the irk and the inkling to commit voter fraud, you're out of your mind. So all of these people saying that this is a distraction, that it's not real, and they're the same people that want to talk about Israeli influence in elections nonstop, but they're not going to talk about China doing the thing whenever this has actually been proven. And their biggest example of this is Thomas Massie. Thomas Massie's biggest donor is Jeff Yass, who is an Israeli mega donor, a billionaire with immense ties to the state of Israel. So if you're going to say that it was Israel that got Thomas Massie unseated, you're wrong. His biggest backing comes from an Israeli mega donor, Jeff Yass. AIPAC had tried to get Thomas Massie out of office before, but you know what was different this time? President Trump made an endorsement against Thomas Massie this time around. It was not Israel that got Thomas Massie out of office. It was President Trump that got Thomas Massie out of office because Thomas Massie cared more about his clicks and views on the internet than he cared about his voters in District 4 of Kentucky. Ed Galrain cares about those people more. President Trump honestly cares about those people more, and that's why Ed Galrain won and beat Thomas Massie. Because Thomas Massie decided to focus more on all these foreign internet issues than the real issues that the voters in Kentucky 4 had. That's why he lost. Not because of foreign interference in an election. And just AIPAC doesn't even rank in like the top 25 of this stuff. Qatar, Pakistan, China, Russia, you name it, have spent vast amounts more money than AIPAC does in these elections. So if you're going to talk about this stuff, talk about the whole thing instead of just using Israel as your little boogeyman. I'm not pro-Israel. I'm not anti-Israel. I really don't care. Okay? But what I do care about is telling the truth. And if we're going to tell the truth, AIPAC is nowhere near the top of this stuff. So stop using it as your little boogeyman and tell the truth and go look at what's really happening here. Is there some Israeli interference in elections? Sure. I'm sure that AIPAC has influenced some. I'm sure there has been. Do I think Russia, China, Qatar, Pakistan have had more influence? Probably. But certainly China, and this has actually been proven with documents. One of the most consequential presidential addresses, certainly in my lifetime, because I'm not even 18 yet, but probably in all of y'all's as well. And they're dead silent on it and honestly trying to harm what President Trump was saying. It's truly shameful. And I'm forever grateful that Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene will never step foot in the United States Capitol again come January. Because they have betrayed their voters, they betrayed President Trump, and they have betrayed America as a whole. All so that they could go get clicks on the internet and push their baseless conspiracy theories. That's going to do it for this first segment on the Andrew Gosser Show. You're listening to 103.9 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back live on the Andrew Gosser Show on 103.9 WYAB. Look, y'all, I got a little mad. I'm not gonna lie on that first segment there, but it's absolutely, I think, imperative to talk about this stuff because we cannot let people just manipulate what is going on, and we have to try to get the truth out there as much as we can. Because if we don't have the truth, then we have nothing. Marjorie Taylor Greene also decided to, and we're gonna move on to Iran here, and you're gonna see how I wrap this in. She had her own little moment yesterday. So President Trump released a True Social post where he compared the length of time we spent in other wars in the Middle East and just in Vietnam and Korea and stuff, and the amount of people that died, and then he compared it to what he did in Venezuela and Iran right now. And people have tried to spin this as Trump like bragging, "Oh, I've only killed this many soldiers." No, what President Trump is trying to say is this narrative that you have created about the Iran war, that it's another endless conflict where we're sending tens of thousands of our young men to go die, is not true. That's what he's trying to point out. President Trump will be at the dignified transfer of four patriots who tragically lost their life over there in the Middle East. He will be there today. I don't think that we have had a commander in chief in a very long time that has cared more about our men and women in uniform that President Trump has. He will be honoring those patriots today while Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing whatever she is, babbling away on Twitter, trying to spin narratives. But like I said, what President Trump is trying to do here is put into comparison what's really going on. This is not some endless war. That is not his temperament. What he's trying to do is get this conflict resolved now so that we don't ever have to deal with it again. I've said that a million times. So this whole fake narrative about this stuff is ridiculous. And this can be proven by how the war is being fought. Obviously, there's been, I guess it was 11 nights in a row we're at now. There'll probably be 12 tonight and 13 tomorrow, of nights where we have bombed Iran. And we're not sending troops over there. We're sending planes, missiles, whatever, to go and just bomb the crap out of them because that's how we can do it. We don't have to send boots on the ground, unlike we did in Iraq and Afghanistan. We don't have to do that. President Trump understands that. And I think that we've seen a lot less casualties because of that, because President Trump hates death. This has been seen time and time again, whether it's abortion, whether it's his approach to Russia, Ukraine, and really conflict in general across the world. That's how he talks about India, Pakistan, all the little conflicts and stuff that he's helped resolve. He wants to see people stop dying. He has a famous tweet where it says, "I just want the world to stop killing itself." And that's his goal here. He saw Iran murder 50,000 of their own civilians because they protested the regime. He hates that. And we understand that Iran, let me specify that the Islamic Republic of Iran cannot be trusted to have the missile capabilities that they did or to try and go make a nuclear weapon. That's what he was trying to fix. That's what he's trying to stop. And he's done a very good job at it so far. And yes, some patriots have tragically lost their lives. That is a reality of war. And I don't think anyone is more sad about that than he is, other than the families. So to try to spin this narrative is just absolutely, absolutely ridiculous to me. And the notion that it is not America first to do what President Trump is doing is also ridiculous to me. Because I think it is far more America first to deal with this problem so that future generations don't have to deal with it than it is to kick the can down the road for it to be a bigger deal. If President Trump didn't do this now, Iran's missile capabilities, their nuclear capabilities, everything would have been far greater and more dangerous than they were whenever President Trump took action in February. So yes, I think it is far more America first to deal with this problem, to reshape the Middle East where we actually have allies in the Middle East and not just people that we have to, control. We just signed a new deal with Saudi Arabia yesterday. We signed a deal with Iraq over the weekend. He is reshaping the Middle East so that we have far more control and we actually have allies in the Middle East. Yeah, beyond Israel, of course, whatever. But I think that is really America first, because America first doesn't just mean America only. We can't cut ourselves off from the world completely. That's just not physically and geographically possible. Okay? What it does mean is making sure that we're the number one global superpower. This has absolutely proven that. And it means reshaping our economy so that we're the number one energy exporter. We are now, thanks to President Trump. and that we don't rely on China and India for our goods as much. And he is doing more than anybody has in the history of the world at making that possible. That's America first. So anyone telling you that this isn't America first, this is America last, they are lying to you. And like I said earlier, if we don't have the truth, we have nothing. This really makes me mad, y'all, but it's okay. All right, so these last 4 minutes here or whatever on this second segment, I'm gonna talk about more of what's actually going on in Iran because I don't really see a whole lot of people talking about this stuff lately. So we're gonna get into it. So basically, we've had this escalation, we've had the strikes this last, couple weeks or whatever at this point, and the U.S. has escalated seemingly every single night. And obviously, after the soldiers were killed in Jordan, it escalated extremely further, and we started hitting a lot more infrastructure stuff, not targeting civilians, but started hitting bridges, power plants, oil refineries, stuff like that. And yesterday, we had the first um, strikes on Tehran or near Tehran in the Iranian capital. That has not happened. I think it happened at the beginning of the war. Obviously, whenever we killed Khamenei and a lot of the other top people in the IRGC, but that has not happened, I don't think, since then. So, and obviously, we've had a bunch of strikes along the Strait of Hormuz. But sort of this is a lot of the stuff that's been going on. And according to Axios, President Trump is approaching a pivotal decision point in the Iran conflict. U.S. and Israeli officials reportedly believe only two realistic paths remain, except a new Qatari mediated ceasefire that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz or launch a large scale joint military campaign with Israel aimed at forcing the Islamic regime to capitulate. I don't see either of those as being the options that President Trump is going to take. I think President Trump actually prefers if Israel stays out of it because Israel oftentimes gets in the way of this stuff. Like whenever we had the other ceasefire and the ceasefire with Israel and Lebanon, they would consistently just go in and blow something up and just sort of throw a wrench in everything. So I think President Trump would just prefer if the U.S. can just bomb away, and eventually they might capitulate. I personally think he needs to take out a lot of the like whatever's left of the high command of the IRGC. I think Khamenei's son, the one that we blew up half his body after we killed his dad, I think he is out of the country, if I'm not mistaken. It's been reported that he fled, so not really sure if we can get him. But I think we need to kill a lot of the people in the IRGC because they're the ones that are in the way of a lot of this stuff. And President Trump said this morning, from this point forward, anytime the Islamic Republic of Iran shoots at a ship in the Strait of Hormuz, whether it be by missile, rocket, drone, or any other device or weapon, the United States of America will bomb and destroy one bridge or power plant, including those located next to or in the capital city of Tehran. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. And so what he's saying is like, yeah, we're not done. We're done playing around with this stuff. And I'm thankful that President Trump has come to that realization. I think he probably knew it. I just think he prefers the peace route. Is that you can't really play around with these people. They respect one thing, and that's bombs. That's terror. So that's what he's doing here. And look, I think it's going to work out for us. I think President Trump understands that time is on his side, and I think it's going to ultimately lead to the eventual capitulation of the Iranian people of the the IRGC, and the Iranian people will finally be set free from this terrorist regime. So that's what we're looking at there in Iran. Stick around. We're going to talk about the Nolan Wells situation and the brand new autopsy findings that were released by Ben Crump at the NAACP convention. So y'all stick around. You're listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 1039 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back live on 1039 WYAB here on the Andrew Gosser Show. Thank y'all for tuning in here. Look, done a lot of like foreign and domestic, or not, sorry, we've done a lot of foreign policy. We have done a lot of national issue stuff here on the show so far, but we're going to get very local really quick here. So this morning, this is sort of breaking news, but Clay talked about it earlier. They did a great job this morning. But the independent, put that in air quotes, it's not really independent, but the independent autopsy of Nolan Wells was released today, or the preliminary findings of it were released today by Nolan Wells' family attorney, Ben Crump. Obviously, we know Ben Crump, the civil rights attorney, the race baiter, everything, right? They released the preliminary findings today, and the cause of death was unknown. Now, obviously, if the narrative that they have been trying to go with, that this was some modern day lynching, if that was really true, then I think that would have been very obvious in the autopsy. And I think that the cause of death would have been homicide. I mean, because you don't beat a kid to death or even beat him a lot and then somehow not notice that in an autopsy, especially if he was only in the water for what, a day or two. So I'm not really, I'm not buying their narrative any more than I wasn't buying it before. Obviously the narrative is just ridiculous and untrue on extreme levels, but this autopsy, I think, confirms what a lot of what we've been saying is that the kid stayed and he partied, probably had too much to drink and potentially had drugs or something and something he took and he drowned. And they were talking about this earlier is that I really don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Michael Phelps. I don't care who you are. You can drown. I don't care how how good of a swimmer you are. You can absolutely drown. And especially in the Mississippi Sound between Horn Island and the mainland, the currents in there are insane because you got water going back and forth, especially with a lot of boats and stuff so like him drowning is not something that I think that if you don't come to that conclusion, you're going to need to bring some evidence that something else happened. And you're certainly not going to be able to convince me that his friends of 3 years decided just to randomly kill him and drown him. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. And then they were talking about this earlier, and absolutely true. And this is sort of what really kills a lot of these race narratives that get pushed all the time whenever stuff like this happens is, who benefits from this sort of cover up and why would they cover it up in the first place? Racism being alive in America is really not, it's just not true. And the people that have been fighting to keep it alive the most are people like Ben Crump, Al Sharpton. Obviously, the SPLC got indicted for it and all of the fraud that they've been committing, funding the KKK, funding the neo-Nazis, all this stuff, right? So if anyone's keeping racism alive okay, let me phrase it this way. If anyone's keeping white on black racism alive in America, it's them. But I think what we have seen undoubtedly as a result of all this stuff is that black on white racism is a lot more prevalent than we understand. Because the immediate reaction of all this stuff was a black kid comes up drowned after hanging out with his white friends. So, of course, his white friends had to kill him. Of course, it was the white boys that had to do it. And I think we see this whether it was Austin Metcalf, whether it was a lot of this stuff. Immediately, the white people are blamed for it. Immediately. And the black people love to talk about, and, that are all the race baiters, they love to talk about white privilege. I really think it's the opposite. Almost everywhere I've been in life, black privilege is absolutely a thing. 1,000,000%. Whether it was at school and I knew some kids could get away with a lot more than the white kids could. I'll just put it that way. Because I love Northwest Frank and I'm not going to, throw it under the bus. But some kids could get away with a lot more, I'm just going to say. So this whole race narrative is it's just ridiculous. It's just absurd. And it's a waste of time. It doesn't do anything productive. And not only are you hurting these innocent kids, his friends that obviously had nothing to do with this, but you're completely gutting the legacy of Nolan Wells. And you're completely using his dead lifeless body to push some political narrative to make yourself feel better. And that is just one of the most disgusting and repulsive things I think that you can do. Use a dead kid, a dead person in general, just to push your little political narrative that is like your little hobby or whatever. And it's just, he is just another example of another black kid, another black person that's been used as a political tool, um, just to push a narrative that doesn't exist. George Floyd was obviously a chief example of this. He obviously had overdose levels of fentanyl in him, criminal. Breonna Taylor shot at cops. Jacob Blake tried to stab a cop. Um, Trayvon Martin got in a fight with a cop. So, all the stuff. And they're using these dead people to push a little political narratives, and it's disgusting. And that's why I don't believe it at all. I don't trust it. And it's disheartening. And it's so disheartening to see people fall for it continually every single time. Like, and they talk about, like, where does this racism exist? Where does the racism exist? I'm genuine question, because it's supposed to be super prevalent here in the South or whatever, but I don't see that at all. And so if you're gonna push this narrative, I wish you'd have a little bit of proof of it, because it's completely non-existent, and I don't know who's buying it anymore. And I really wish people would stop talking about it, because the more and more that we just continue to talk about this BS and let these people continue with this narrative without any real pushback from anyone in the mainstream, you're just going to keep racism alive whenever it's not there at all. So if no one's going to push back on it, I don't know why we're not doing that, because like I said multiple times earlier, if we don't have the truth, we have nothing. So, but y'all are good on the Andrew Gossett show. Y'all push back on this stuff. Y'all keep doing what you're doing. We're going to keep talking about it because, like I said, we got to tell the truth. Nothing more important than that. Look, we got one more second left in this first hour. One more segment left in this first hour. Listen to the Andrew Gossett show on 1039 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back live here on the Andrew Gosher Show on 1039 WYAB. And Andrew switched up the bump music on me. I like it though. He always got some good stuff going. Look, we got, I guess it would be 8 minutes left, a little bit less than 8 minutes left here on this first hour. Stay tuned for the second hour. We're going to keep going, like we always do, talking about everything going on. So, but look, here on this last little stretch here, I wanted to sort of elaborate what I was talking about last segment and how they, they're trying to keep racism alive. And I saw something on Instagram during the break that made me want to talk about this. Is that, obviously one of their big reasons that they're pushing it against the Save Act, and we're going to get more into the Save Act later, is they try to say that the Save Act and voter ID is racist. They try to say that black people are incapable of getting the voter ID, which is just ridiculous. Um, and that's one of their main arguments about it, against it, is that it's racist. And that is why they want to keep racism alive in America, is so that they can use it as this political tool whenever it's convenient to them. You need ID to do just about anything in life. And if you can't get an ID, first of all, why? Go to the DMV, you get it, whatever. And secondly, it's really not that hard. Like, what do you mean you can't get an ID? How are you living in this world without an ID? You need it for everything, just about. So that notion is obviously just completely ridiculous, but there's enough people that lap up that racism stuff that it can be effective, and a decent amount of people are going to buy into it, that it becomes a problem. So, but that's just like, it just proves what I was saying, is that they're using racism, and everyone knows this. It's not, an idea for me, but they're using racism. They're keeping it alive so that they can exert political pressure whenever they really don't have an argument against something. And unfortunately, there's enough dumb people in the world that'll believe it. So, but don't let them do that. Educate people, because I think it is far more racist to assume that a group of people can't get identification than it is to require ID to vote. To me, that is extremely racist to think that little of people. So, and honestly, it goes beyond race, because they're trying to say that, well, if women can't prove who they are because they got married or whatever, like, what are y'all talking about? The bill does not say that. It's nowhere in the bill. You can prove who you are, even if you got married and had your last name changed and your maiden name, whatever. So, like, it's just all so ridiculous. And what's even more ridiculous is the fact that we have a bunch of useless Republicans in the Senate who are refusing to get it through. But like I was talking about earlier, thankfully, a lot of those people are headed out the door. And I think a lot more of those people in 2028 will be headed out the door as well. So, look, that's just what we're dealing with. But, it is what it is. So, but Lord willing, we'll get it done. We'll get the Save Act passed. But just don't let anyone try to tell you that this is about race, that it's racist to require ID. That's just one of the most ludicrous things I have ever heard in my life. But here we are dealing with it. So, but yeah, it's absolutely absurd. So, and like I said, we're going to talk more about the Save Act and everything next hour. And because ever since President Trump's address to the nation Thursday night, more and more instances of illegal aliens being registered to vote, and voter fraud has just come out. Uh, New Jersey said that they found 6,000 illegal immigrants registered to vote in New Jersey because of their automatic registration at the DMV that they have. Which, if they're admitting that they found 6,000, you could probably add at least a couple zeros to that number for what the actual number is. But we're going to get a lot deeper into that stuff later, because obviously it's very important. President Trump released a statement on True Social about it yesterday. And so we're going to look more into that as well. But, this is just what it is. So, oh, okay. This is breaking news. Four House Republicans just blocked an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act that would have codified Donald Trump's executive order preventing mentally ill transgender people from serving in the U.S. military, 211 to 217. The no's were Brian Fitzpatrick in Pennsylvania, Kimberly King Hines in the Northern Mariana Islands, Mike Lawler from New York, and James Moylan in Guam. Why would you vote against that? Why would anyone vote against blocking mentally ill people from being a part of the military? That makes no sense to me. This is just another indictment of how, like, yes, Republicans control all three branches of government, but we know how useless a lot of our people in the House and the Senate are, and that the uniparty is alive and well. I don't understand why. Gosh, that's just so horrible. We're gonna get into a little bit more of this. We've seen a lot of the stuff with birth citizenship, obviously since the Supreme Court made the ruling on it, but how China immensely benefits from that, and because these people eventually vote in U.S. elections. And so this we're gonna start putting the puzzle pieces together here and really make the case for why this stuff matters because it absolutely does. And like I said earlier, anyone that tells you that this stuff doesn't matter are they're just lying to you straight through their teeth, and they're being dishonest because they know that it's gonna drive up their engagement on social media. That's all that they care about. We're also gonna get into so yesterday, Arizona had some pretty big elections. They had all of their primary elections for statewide and for, um, their congressional races, and President Trump just he swept the night. Turning Point swept the night. And so we're gonna expand on that a little bit because we love talking about President Trump's victories here. So yeah, we got an exciting second hour packed in for y'all. We still got what do we have? A minute left. So, but yeah, just sort of previewing what we're going to talk about next hour. Um, One of the most wanted from the FBI for their fraud list was arrested yesterday. Notorious fugitive arrested in connection with $547 million in Medicare fraud. Defendant captured after being placed on FBI most wanted fraudsters list. So yeah, just more and more stuff that we're doing every single day to help fix the mess that the Biden administration and really the Obama administration left America in. And thankfully, and we're so grateful to God that He gave America another chance, and that President Trump is working so hard to clean up this mess because it's going to take some time, but thankfully he's working honestly at light speed to help get a lot of this stuff fixed, and we are thankful for it every single day, and more wins like that, and I promise we're gonna expand on this next hour. More stuff like that happening is going to increase Republican turnout in the midterms because it is so crucial that we win the midterms so that Democrats never get control again because we know exactly what they're going to do. So never black pill, stay focused, stay locked in on winning. Look, we're going to be back here for the second hour. Y'all stay tuned. You're listening to Andrew Gosser Show on 1039 WYAB. We will be right back. And that's right, you are listening to the Andrew Gosher Show on 1039 WYAB. Here for this second hour here on this beautiful July 22nd, year of our Lord 2026. Want to thank those that tuned in for the first hour, but we're here for the second hour. Gonna have even more fun. Look, we're gonna talk about the verse of the day real quick. Matthew 6:25. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? I think that's a great reminder. To me, it just the world just seems so materialistic, and I think it's very obvious in a lot of our music, pop culture, everything, that just the world is just so focused on things and they're not focused on God. So that is another great reminder of what we should truly aspire to live like. So yeah, all right, look, let's get into it. Obviously, we're streaming on YouTube, we're streaming on Facebook, we're streaming on Rumble, we're streaming on X, or Twitter if you still call it that. And if you can't find us anywhere else, you can always find us on wyab.com. So let's immediately start rolling in here to the second hour. Like I teased, we're going to be talking about New Jersey and the illegal aliens that were found to be registered to vote. And we're going to talk about even more about what DHS found last week in the wake of President Trump's address to the nation regarding election integrity. And yeah, we're just going to go ahead and start off with that. So yesterday, if you don't know, New Jersey Governor Nikki Sherrill, she released a statement, and I think she had like a little speech or whatever she made. It was only like 6 minutes long, where she talked about how the state of New Jersey found that 6,000 illegal immigrants were registered to vote in New Jersey because of their like automatic registration that you can do at the DMV. So I'm going to read this little thing on Twitter about this. So the identity services provider New Jersey uses at the DMV is firing back at Governor Sherrill, saying the New Jersey Division of Elections were the ones who registered 6,600 foreign voters. This was not a software error. This is a scandal. IDEM, I don't even know what that is. So whatever this thing's role is to transit information through the motor vehicle system. The voter registration information is transited to the New Jersey Department of State Division of Elections, which is ultimately responsible for verifying eligibility to vote. Information submitted by IDEMIA must still be validated and adjudicated by the Division of Elections. So what this means is that in New Jersey, their divisions of elections manually approved over 6,000 foreigners to vote. They were not automatically registered by the software provider, as the governor claimed. So what New Jersey's governor tried to claim was that there was this software glitch that registered over 6,000 illegal immigrants to vote. Yeah. Isn't it really convenient that all of these software glitches just happen to benefit Democrats? Like, whether it's the massive dumps of mail-in votes at the middle of the night, or whether it's all these illegal aliens voting, whatever it may be, they always happen to benefit the Democrats. And so this comes in the wake of President Trump's massive address to the nation Thursday night, where he talked about all this stuff and the 250,000 non-citizens registered to vote. And President Trump actually claims that the number of illegals registered to vote is a lot higher than what the governor of New Jersey would like to say it is. And I think President Trump is probably a lot closer to the number than she is, because I think if they're admitting that they found 6,000, there's probably a lot more. So President Trump had this to say: 35,152 is the new number just released by Homeland Security of non-citizens registered to vote in New Jersey. These are just the ones that got caught. The real numbers will prove to be many times this amount. They are all Democrats. Republicans get smart and straighten out crooked elections, pass the Save America Act. And he's absolutely right. Stuff like this that we just continue to see time and time again is exactly why we need to pass the Save America Act. It forces you to prove who you are and prove U.S. citizenship. Because, and this is something they've been running with for a little bit now, that just one vote from an illegal immigrant steals the vote of another American citizen, and it's absolutely true. We cannot claim to have secure elections if even one fraudulent ballot is cast, because one fraudulent ballot cast is one too many. So, yeah, we got to pass the Save America Act because I do not want our elections compromised by illegal immigrants in foreign countries. Um, we need to have American elections for Americans. And that shouldn't be controversial, yet it is, and it's because that this is what the whole illegal immigration thing has been about. It's been about fraud. It's been about welcoming all these people in, so many people that they try to force through amnesty so that these people can get citizenship and then eventually vote for Democrats. That's what it's all about. They don't care about the people. They don't care about whatever struggles they may be going through. They care that one day they might be able to vote and keep Democrats in office. That is exactly what all of this is about. And it's another one of the big reasons why not only President Trump securing the border, but getting the SAVE Act passed has been imperative. And we've done the first part, which is securing the border and completely reshaping our immigration system in America. We need to do the second part and get the Save America Act passed. So we're going to look at a lot of the stuff that DHS has sort of been releasing about all this stuff. And they have sort of played a big part in this because they're working with a lot of these state, I guess the state Secretary of State's office, so that they can get a lot of these voter rolls cleaned up, and they're even having to go to court to even access a lot of this information. So President Trump announced last Thursday that 250,000 illegal immigrants were registered to vote across America. But what was really shocking about this, or I guess startling, because I don't know if it was shocking, but what was startling about this is that it was only across 4 states. I think it was Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and a couple others. And basically, what that tells me is that the number is extremely high. And imagine what it's like in the states that have not been cooperating. Like, how many illegal immigrants are registered to vote in New York? How many are registered to vote in California, all up and on the West Coast? Stuff like that. So that's really what I want to get into. So, and we're gonna start diving into what they were saying in the wake of Thursday after this. So it's just been insane. It has just been insane. So a preliminary Homeland Security review found over 250,000 non-citizens registered to vote in 4 states: California, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. This shouldn't be a red or blue state issue. Only Americans should elect American leaders. We've put these governors on notice. States must work with us to ensure free, fair, and honest elections. If you'll notice there, Pennsylvania and Nevada, that's 2 swing states. You start to put together the pieces, how much did President Trump lose? I put that in air quotes. How much did he lose by in Nevada and Pennsylvania combined in 2020? It wasn't by much. I really don't think it was by much. So it really just starts to put into perspective, how big this really goes. So they sort of break it down by state. They say that there may be as many as 190,000 non-citizens registered to vote in California. How many of those people do you think voted in that mayor's election that Spencer Pratt lost, that they took months to count? Makes you think, doesn't it? All right. For Nevada, there may be as many as 15,000 non-citizens registered to vote in Nevada. They've had a lot of close elections in Nevada recently. Don't you think that's a little significant? All right. For New Jersey, as many as 35,000 in New Jersey. That's a lot higher than the number that the governor tried to claim. And then for Pennsylvania, there may be as many as 15,000. That's insane, especially for as close as the elections in these states have been. And if that's just what we found, imagine how much we haven't found. And imagine what New York's like, and honestly, a lot of these states. And you're absolutely right. When the Save America Act gets passed and certain states refuse to follow it, nothing will happen. I think that something will have to happen because if it's federal law, they have to abide by it, and if we have the power of the purse in Congress, then you're sort of gonna, well, for one, force their hand, but two, you have to enforce federal election law. Like that's a requirement. The Constitution delegates those powers pretty clear. If we pass a federal law and it's deemed constitutional, then they have to follow it. So I think something would happen if states refuse this, and I think something will happen if these states refuse to cooperate with sort of the investigation into a lot of this stuff, and trying to find out how many non-citizens are registered to vote. President Trump has shown time and time again he is not scared at all to remove funding for these states and withhold it until these states get their act together, whether it's fraud, whether it's the voting, whatever. So um, I think that something will happen. And this stuff takes time though, and we only found out a lot of the stuff, newly released stuff, um, because Tulsi Gabbard was finally able to get in there into the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and start to get to work on a lot of this stuff. And we know how big this stuff is, so I can't really imagine a world where it wouldn't take a lot of time to figure this stuff out because we know how big the conspiracies went. We know how much COVID had to do with a lot of this stuff, and it's all tied together. And if we had like a sort of shadow government like they admitted, I think the conspiracy would be pretty deep, and I don't see why something wouldn't happen. President Trump is very, you know, very much so focused on getting sort of, I don't know if retribution is the right word, but he's very focused on getting to the bottom of this stuff so that we don't have to deal with it ever again, so that something this honestly treasonous doesn't happen again. And I agree, there needs to be arrest, but I don't expect that to come immediately. Um, I think they wanted to get their preliminary findings into these investigations out so that the American people knew that it was an issue. And I think they're going to continue with their investigations and continue moving forward with a lot of this stuff. And I think that we will see eventually arrests will happen. Um, so yeah, and just to go back again, man, like you're gonna try to pass this off as a software glitch? That's absurd. No one believes that. Who in the world would believe that? And Harmeet Dillon, who is the civil rights attorney at the DOJ, she notes that New Jersey is one of the states refusing to allow the Justice Department to go in and help fix these errors. And she says, stay tuned. And so, like I said, I think stuff will absolutely happen with this. And, whether it's funding, whether it's arrest, whatever, something will come of this. And it has to. And if not, then I really missed the point of what we're doing here. But, I think it's just so telling is that this is what we're dealing with. Is that it's honestly, it's rebellion to the federal government trying to get to the bottom of a lot of this stuff. And that's not something we should tolerate at all. So whatever they need to do to get that fixed, they need to do it. And I hope that they do it soon. But honestly, I understand where they're coming from, where this is going to take a lot of time. So, but yeah, look, that's going to do it for this first segment, second hour here on the Andrew Gosser Show. You're listening to 1039 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back live on the Andrew Gosser Show on 1039 WYAB. Here for the second segment here on the second hour. Look, last segment we talked about the SAVE Act and New Jersey and all of the stuff that happened in previous elections. Now we're going to talk about stuff that happened yesterday in elections. So, in case you don't know, which um, I don't expect everyone to be as clued into some of this politics stuff as I am. I'm sort of obsessed with it. But yesterday in Arizona, they had their primary elections for their statewide offices and for their congressional offices. And President Trump and Turning Point USA completely swept the state. So Andy Biggs, who was one of Charlie Kirk's last, I guess, like real political projects, was getting Andy Biggs elected as governor. He won, I guess what that'd be, 60 points yesterday. He won by 60 points in that Republican primary yesterday with a grand total of 379,770 votes, which for a Republican primary, that is a lot of votes. And that's only with 84.4% of the expected votes in. They say that 97,000 are out there. So that'll be Andy Biggs going up against the incumbent Katie Hobbs, who has really just sort of run Arizona into the ground in a lot of areas. Job creation is slow. People are leaving the state. But that's where Turning Point is headquartered. So they're really on top of their Arizona elections. So that was great. And then obviously just across the board, whether it was Congress, the state elections, President Trump and Turning Point completely swept the field. And it's just another example that despite what many on the dissident right and the people, the never Trumpers would have you believe, President Trump, Turning Point USA, they are bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. And it gets proven every single election night in this country. And I think it really just needs to put into perspective that, where really is the conscience of the voter base in America. It's still with President Trump, despite what many people on social media would have you believe. But let's get a little deeper into this. And like I said, that win from Andy Biggs there, that was massive, massive. No one really expected him to win by that much, but he did. And what does that say about how good Turning Point is at their ground game? What does that say about the influence of President Trump's endorsement? Would he have won by that much without it? I don't think so. So yeah, that's significant. And I think that shows that, people want to say that we're guaranteed to lose in the midterms. And I don't think that's true. And we certainly shouldn't have that mindset because, that sort of mindset doesn't help. It doesn't help anybody. And I don't know why you would want to go look at something like that. Obviously, don't go into something acting like you're going to win, but never count yourself out of a fight that early. And that's true just not for elections, but for anything in life. Just don't immediately count yourself out like that. And because that loser mentality, that is eventually going to affect what you're doing. And go out, do what we can, talk to people where they're at, and that's sort of the model that Charlie left us. And I really wish more people just than Turning Point and the Trump administration tried to continue that legacy on. Because voters, and this is true for local elections, this is true for national elections, it is true that when you meet these voters where they're at, that really means a lot to these people. And if someone's willing to knock on your door and talk to you about something, that shows a lot for how much they care about it. And it speaks to people. And it's worked time and time again here in America, is that whenever you have that good ground game from Turning Point, whenever you have President Trump's endorsement, because whether you like it or not, President Trump is the people's president right now, you're going to get the results that we're looking for. We're going to win if we follow that blueprint. And I think that we're seeing it happen time and time again, and I wish more people were accepting of it, and I wish more people would, sort of lead by that example. We have a chance to do the same thing in Mississippi, by following that grassroots model, by following that, you know, connecting with people, meeting them where they're at. But it's a matter of, is that what we want to focus on, or do we want to focus on other stuff that really doesn't matter to the people of Mississippi? So, and Turning Point has rightfully so committed, or sort of taken on this win and bragging about it, because they absolutely deserve to. This is the people have been doubting Turning Point's capabilities since Charlie passed away. And they've been proven wrong time and time again. And instead of dogging on Turning Point and trying to say that they're gone, I don't know why we wouldn't try to keep them afloat, do everything we can to keep that ground game going. Charlie built that company, and or that organization into what it is, and I don't know why we would just let it go to waste now that he's not there. That's not at all what he would have wanted. So, but they've rightfully been taking a victory lap after all this stuff. And Tyler Bower, who was Turning Point Actions head or whatever, he said this is one of the biggest primary wins in modern Arizona history, one of the biggest governor primary wins this election cycle. Go bigs or go home. So proud of our entire Turning Point Action team who's been working so hard with our voters. Now the work begins. We must win in November. And Arizona has been a state that has been really, really, really interesting to watch, because obviously they had the shenanigans in 2020. But since then, and because Turning Point USA put their headquarters there, it has slowly become, I would almost say, a reliable Republican state. Trump won it, just drove up the numbers big in 2020 or 2024 there. And they have had in 2024, Republicans also won in a lot of the local elections, and that's why you started to see some of the election stuff get cleaned up there in Arizona. I think that Carrie Lake had her Senate seat stolen from her, but they're looking to change a lot of that stuff, and not only this year with getting Andy Biggs into the governor's office, but getting Ruben Gallego out of the Senate in 2028. So that is a lot of the stuff that we're looking at, and it's been great to see people get proven wrong about Turning Point and President Trump, because this is the movement. President Trump is the movement. Turning Point is a vessel which we can go and win with the movement. And that's just the reality of the situation. And whether you like it or not, it is what it is. And it would behoove a lot of people to put their little personal grievances to the side, go back to that big tent coalition we had in 2024 ahead of the election, and we can really go out and make some more stuff happen. So that's the message I want to leave with that. But it's always fun to talk about these wins, because they're real, they're tangible, and it's something that we can see with our eyes, and not something that you're just telling me to believe based on some theory you heard on the internet. So that's what we're all about here. We're all about telling the truth, and we're all about trying to give people the blueprint to win, so that we can make America great again. Look, that's going to wrap it up here for this second segment on the Andrew Gosser Show. You're listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 1039 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back live on the Andrew Gosser Show on 1039 WYAB. Before we start wrapping up, well, I guess the show today, we only have, 20 minutes left or whatever. I do want to touch a little bit more on the stuff going on in Arizona, and I want to expand it nationally. So one of the big wins that happened yesterday for Turning Point and President Trump is Alex Kolodin won the Republican primary for Arizona Secretary of State. This is someone who famously stood with President Trump and tried to get to the bottom of the fraud that happened in Arizona in the 2020 election. And my point in bringing this up, because Blake, why are you talking about a Secretary of State in Arizona whenever this is a radio show in Central Mississippi? My point is that the remodeling of American politics that started whenever President Trump came down the golden escalator in 2015 is really starting to rear its head. This is something that was not going to happen overnight, and is something that was not going to happen in just a few years. It was going to take time. And 11 years since then, we are starting to see American politics reshape itself, where we actually have patriots in office. Just sit down and think about how different the House of Representatives, the Senate, even a lot of our federal bureaucracies and a lot of state legislatures and governors' offices look now compared to what they did in 2016. You had Speaker Paul Ryan, Senate. I guess McConnell would have been the majority leader in after the 2016 elections. And then now, obviously, Thune still sucks. So the Senate is obviously our biggest problem, but the Senate is starting to get reshaped, like we were talking about earlier, with Cornyn, Tillis, McConnell, Cassidy all leaving and being replaced with a lot better people than they were. But in the House, the Freedom Caucus has been established. I think Mike Johnson is, say whatever you want about Mike Johnson. I certainly have my opinions on him, but I think he has done a much better job than Paul Ryan. But you have a lot more prevalent people like Tim Burchett, Anna Paulina Luna, Byron Donalds, Wesley Hunt. A lot of these people that are real good conservative, loyal patriots who have sort of taken over the scene over there and made the House into, I think, a much more effective legislative body than it was just 11 years ago. And especially with stuff like this in a lot of our state positions across the country, whether it be governors, whatever, just completely reshaped. You had in a lot of these states, you had a lot of just good old boys that would win these offices, and you didn't have people who were aggressive. And this doesn't just go for Mississippi, although Mississippi, it is certainly true, but it went for places like Arizona. It went for places like Florida, like Tennessee. Jeb Bush was the governor of Florida at one point. But now, I have my fair share of things to say about Ron DeSantis, but he's been one of the most effective conservative governors in the history of America. He really has. He's been one of the best. I think that's where he always should have stayed, and he should never have run for president, but it is what it is. But really the overarching point that I'm trying to stay here is that, good things never come easy, and they certainly don't come quickly. And this is why it is always so important to stay engaged and stay involved in politics, no matter how frustrating it gets, because, if we really want to create that change, if we want to build that movement that we so desperately want to, so that we can recognize our country again, it takes many years, honestly decades, to entrench that change into our politics. That's just the reality of the situation. And if we want to have that lasting legacy, if we want to build that future for our children, well, if y'all want to build that future for your children, I'm going to have to live in it regardless. Then that's something that we need to do. And Mississippi has this chance in 2027 to start to get, patriots into office in 2027 into our state government. What Arizona is trying to do right now, what Florida has done, what Tennessee has sort of done, what Georgia has kind of done, what Louisiana is trying to do, what Alabama has certainly done. I'm tired of Mississippi falling behind on this stuff, and I really wish that, more people would start to wake up to that. And that's what I try to do every single time I come on the radio. I try to talk about this in some form or fashion, because it's that important to me. 2027 is that chance that we have to get these, aggressive people into office who are going to not just fight against the evil ideas of the left, but who are going to actually push for new conservative policy. And 2027 is that chance. So whenever you're deciding on who you're going to vote for in 2027, I ask you to simply look for who is going to create change, who's not just going to talk, but who is going to create the change that we so desperately want, that we have been so desperately fighting for. Not only just to help pass laws, but to sort of just change the stigma around Mississippi. Um, I've said this a million times, is that Mississippi just sort of feels like it's been sort of stuck in the mud, that people don't, especially the state legislature, just doesn't like to do a whole lot. And the House has thankfully sort of started to turn that around, but the Senate has been standing in the way. But 2027 is our chance to change that. And especially if we get someone good in the governor's office who understands that we need to have aggressive conservatives into office, we can really start to create that change that has started to happen across the country and bring it home so that Mississippi is not left behind yet again. So that is what I implore you to do as we start to build up to 2027. It's getting more exciting by the day. Obviously, the governor's race is extremely crowded, and is only going to get more crowded. Um, Secretary of State's is going to be very interesting. State auditor is going to be very interesting. All of these positions, right? I've heard several times that the Attorney General's race is going to be very crowded as well. So we have a chance to create that change in Mississippi, and it's just a matter of how much are you willing to work for it? Are you willing to stay engaged despite the frustrations? And how much faith are you going to put into God that it's going to work out? Because ultimately, He's the arbiter of what's going to happen, and whatever He decides is ultimately going to be the best outcome that we could possibly have. So, look, that's going to do it for this third segment on the Andrew Gosser Show. We got one more left. Y'all stay with us. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Andrew Gosser Show on 1039 WYAB. We will be right back. And we are back live here for the last segment on the Andrew Gosser Show on 1039 WYAB. Look, we got about what I guess it'd be 9 minutes left here on the show. Want to thank y'all for tuning in today. I think Andrew's going to be back tomorrow. I'm not sure, but want to thank him again for letting me come on and do this. Always love doing this. I hope y'all enjoy me. I try to get better at it every single time that I do it. One of the things that I know that I have a problem with is I talk really fast, and I've been trying to work on that a little bit. So hopefully that gets better. But one thing that I wanted to do on this last little segment here is name out the four soldiers, the four American heroes who paid the ultimate price in Iran over the past week. Obviously, they had their dignified transfer today. President Trump met with the families and everything. So we're really praying for them and their families, and we really thank those patriots for paying the price, so that we can have a freer world and a safer world. So I just wanted to list out their names. First, Lieutenant Tyler Feehan, Sergeant Michael Swinton, Sergeant Angel Rampersad, and Private Isabella Gonzalez. I apologize if I mispronounced any of those names, but I just wanted to specifically name them, thank them for what they did, for their immense courage, their immense patriotism. And the White House put out a little statement. They said, "Today we honor four American heroes who made the ultimate sacrifice in service to our nation." They then listed the names, and they said that may God hold them in his eternal embrace and comfort their grieving families, and may God forever bless the United States of America. Um, and I'm so thankful that we have an administration that cares about our soldiers and our military the way that President Trump does. And I'm really, 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 really hoping that we can get this whole situation figured out soon, and I really think we will. President Trump is working to get this situation fixed fast, and I don't think there's anyone that really wants it to be over more than him, because he just wants to get the problem out the way so that we never have to worry about it again. And I really think that's been his goal with this whole thing, this entire time. So, but look, we got a little bit of time here. I want to sort of give everyone a preview of what I think is going to happen in Iran, just because we don't have a lot of time left, and I think this is something too important to talk about. So, like I said, I guess that was way earlier in the show. There's been an extremely increased amount of escalation with everything that's been going on, and I think we're only going to see that more and more. The more and more that the U.S. becomes sort of friends with a lot of the other nations in the Middle East, I think the pressure is going to continue to ramp up on Iran. I think that was by design. And obviously, economically, we are putting the pressure on them. We're upholding the blockade over all of their stuff that tries to get through the Strait of Hormuz. And obviously, we're continuing to bomb them night in and night out. And I think it is only going to get more intense. And eventually, whether it's the people that uprise or the IRGC just finally comes to their senses, something is going to happen where they're just forced, where they can't do anything anymore. And I think that's just the reality of the situation. So, but look, all we can really do, and this is something that my friend down in Brandon, Monica Baldwin, her whole thing that she does is it's called Calling America Back to God. They do it every other Saturday over there in Crossgates. I think I can't remember what the exact roads are. I think it's East Metro and Highway 80 cross. I think at that intersection is where they wave their American flags and have the sign that says Calling America Back to God. But what I'm trying to say here is that, I really think all we can do is pray. Pray for our leaders, pray for the world, really just pray that God's will is done, and that the people that are making these decisions appeal to God on what to do, because that is ultimately how we get the best situation, get the most peace that we possibly can in the Middle East, because we know that real peace in the Middle East is only possible through God. So if I have anything that you remember from this whole show, is that just pray for our leaders, pray for the world, pray that we get peace, because blessed are the peacemakers. But I just wanted to sort of single that out and single out the American soldiers that tragically lost their lives, and we're forever grateful to them for that. Look, preview. Stay tuned on WYAB. Once I get done here, uh, Lindsey Beckham, Clay Edwards, they're going to be going hard on the Nolan Wells independent autopsy that was released. So y'all stay tuned on WYAB. Whatever they're talking about is probably going to be a lot more engaging than the crap that I'm talking about. Me and Andrew like to go a lot more national, but I know this Nolan Wells thing has been on people's mind. Obviously, I gave my take on it, but they're going to be sort of digging into this, and they're going to be going hard on this. Just like Clay, it just drives me up a wall. I could talk about it forever, but I don't want to, reiterate what I've already been said about it. So, but yeah, stay tuned on WYAB. That is coming up on the next hour. They're going to be live from 12 to 1. So y'all stay tuned for that. But we just got, what is that, 3 minutes left. So I'm going to keep talking about this stuff here. The just always watching these dignified transfers is so sad. It's just a reminder that freedom isn't free, and I hope that's not lost on people. Is that we are very privileged to live in America, but freedom is never free. Our founders, a lot of our ancestors fought and died so that we could enjoy the privileges and freedom that we do today. And that's why it's so important that we always fight for our republic and fight for our freedoms and fight for what we believe in, because ultimately we are privileged that we can fight that through discourse and politics instead of having to use weapons and violence to fight for our freedoms. So just please never forget that. And I really hope that more people start to realize that as we get closer to these elections that are going to have, extreme sort of ramifications on the future of this state, because we have a chance to reset everything. I'm not going to reiterate that again. But that's sort of what we're faced with right now. So always remember that freedom is never free, and never be afraid to fight for what you believe in, because we've got a state to save, we have a nation to save, and we honestly have a world to save. And obviously we can only really achieve that through Jesus Christ. So if I can pass anything on that's remembered from this, I hope that that is the thing that y'all remember. So just ending it up here. Just in Iran, I think we're going to get more escalations. Will that come with hitting infrastructure? Probably will. But, I really think it is what it is. If we want to get that problem solved, that we don't have to worry about it again, I think that's how you do it. Little nugget of news that I saw this morning. I know this is hard to remember, but Nicolas Maduro, who we kidnapped in the middle of the night, he actually had a court appearance this morning. And I believe his trial is set to begin, I want to say, a little less than a year from now. So that's going to be a lot of his charges relating to the drug trafficking and terrorism and stuff like that. I didn't talk about this because, well, we're just going to save it for another day. But a lot of the stuff that had to do with the voting machines and all the irregularities of that nature in 2020, a lot of that can be traced back to Venezuela and Maduro. So I think undoubtedly Maduro started to sing like a little canary about a lot of this stuff. And I think that's going to work into his trial and everything that they're doing there. So be paying attention to that stuff. He's probably not the last dictator or whatever in our hemisphere that we're going to have to deal with, whether it's Cuba, Nicaragua, Colombia. The Don Road Doctrine is going to absolutely be enforced. So y'all stay tuned for all that stuff. Look, we're wrapping it up here. Got about 30 seconds left. Once again, just want to thank y'all for tuning in. Thank you to Andrew for letting me do this. Hope that y'all have a fantastic rest of your week. Try to stay cool out there. And if you got people on the coast, check on them with the tropical storm that's down there. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless you. God bless our men and women in the armed forces. God bless America. God bless President Trump. Y'all have a fantastic day. I will see y'all later.